Once, the American prairie was alive with thunder. From horizon to horizon, millions of bison moved like a living sea. So vast, their hooves shook the earth. So many, their shadows swallowed the sun. For centuries, they were the heart of this land, the source of life, myth, and memory. But all that changed in a single brutal generation. The rifles came. The slaughter began. The prairie, once deafening with life, fell silent, echoing only with the ghosts of what was lost. There was a time when America's wild plains belonged to the bison. And then, for nearly a century, the silence of extinction reigned.
A sea of life, the age of the bison. Long before highways carved the land and fences drew invisible lines, the North American plains belonged to the bison. Their herds moved in numbers almost impossible to imagine, tens of millions, darkening the prairie like thunderclouds, flowing for days without end. When they passed, the earth itself seemed to breathe, grass rising and falling with the tide of hooves. This was not just a spectacle, but a living engine of nature. Wherever the bison roamed, the land flourished. Their grazing shaped the grasslands, their hooves turned the soil, their waste fed the earth. Birds, wolves, insects, and even rivers depended on the rhythm of their migrations. For the native peoples, the Lakota, the Cheyenne, the Crow, the bison were more than food or clothing. They were spirit, family, survival itself. Every part of the animal was used, honored, woven into legend and ceremony. In stories told by firelight, the bison was both ancestor and guide, teaching respect for the land and humility before its power. To witness the great herds was to witness the beating heart of a continent. The age of the bison was an age of life, wild and unbroken, until the tides of history began to turn.
The slaughter begins, greed, war, and extinction. The end began with a trigger pull. What centuries of ice, drought, and predators could not do, human ambition accomplished in a matter of decades. As the iron rails of the railroad slashed across the continent, the great herds met their first true enemy, progress at any cost. Hunters arrived by the thousands, rifles gleaming, drawn not by hunger, but by profit and sport. Each day they felled bison by the hundreds, sometimes leaving nothing behind but hides and bones. The slaughter was systematic and deliberate. The U.S. government saw the bison as more than just animals. They were the heartbeat of native nations, the key to their survival. By erasing the herds, policymakers believed they could break the will of the people who called the plains home. And so, mountains of skulls rose beside empty railways. Bones were shipped east for fertilizer, hides for industry. The prairie, once alive with thunder, was littered with death. Travelers wrote of days when the horizon was nothing but carcasses, rotting under the open sky. In a single generation, the bison, once uncountable, became ghosts. The silence that followed was not just the end of an animal, but the unraveling of a world. Yellowstone, the last refuge. By the close of the 19th century, the American bison had nearly vanished. From tens of millions, their numbers fell to fewer than 100, scattered, hunted, haunted. But in the heart of Yellowstone, a miracle and a tragedy unfunded. Here in the world's first national park, the last wild bison found their final sanctuary. The land that once thundered with hooves was now eerily silent, broken only by the lonely calls of the survivors. Even this refuge was not safe. Poachers slipped through the forests by night, hunting for profit in defiance of the law. Park rangers, outnumbered and often unarmed, risked everything to protect the handful of bison left alive. Sometimes they failed. In 1902, it is said, Just 23 bison remained in Yellowstone's great expanse, a fragile thread between extinction and hope. Here, on this haunted ground, the fate of a species rested on the choices of a few. The prairie that once belonged to millions was now guarded, desperately, for the sake of memory and redemption. The fight for survival, blood, sacrifice, and hope. The battle for the bison was fought not with armies, but with courage and desperation, one small victory at a time. In Yellowstone, rangers became guardians, patrolling vast wilderness with little more than grit and borrowed guns. They tracked poachers through deep snow, sometimes exchanging gunfire in the name of a vanishing herd. Every calf born was a triumph. Every body found was a loss mourned in silence. Outside the park, a few voices rose above the indifference. William Hornaday, a naturalist haunted by what he'd witnessed, gathered the last wild bison to create the Bronx Zoo's breeding herd, planting the seeds of a possible return. President Theodore Roosevelt, himself a hunter and lover of the wild, made the bison's cause a matter of national honor. These efforts were desperate, imperfect, sometimes too late. But together, they formed a fragile lifeline. Piece by piece, law by law, hope began to flicker in the dark. The bison, once doomed to join the mammoth and the dodo, clung to survival, defiant against the odds. In the blood and cold of Yellowstone, a question echoed. Could we undo the damage done? Or was it already too late? The price we paid. Legacy of the massacre. The slaughter of the bison left scars far deeper than empty fields. The land itself changed. Without the bison's grazing, the prairie grasses grew rank and wild, choking rivers and starving birds. Wolves and bears, deprived of their ancient prey, faded into myth. Where there had once been balance, now there was silence. For the native peoples, the loss was even greater. The bison had been their food, shelter, clothing, heart and soul of 1,000 generations. In a single lifetime, sacred traditions were broken, languages faded, the stories of the buffalo people left unfinished. The genocide of the herds became a quiet echo of the genocide inflicted on the tribes themselves. America paid a price, not just in lost abundance, but in lost memory, lost connection, lost humility before the wild. The massacre was more than history, it was a warning. What we destroy in nature, we also destroy in ourselves. Redemption, the return of the bison. Slowly, almost painfully, the bison began to return. Through the work of rangers, scientists, native nations, and everyday citizens, a handful of animals grew into a living legacy. Laws changed, fences fell. The silence on the prairie was broken once more by the low thunder of hooves. But recovery was not a miracle. It was the result of sacrifice and vigilance, of people determined not to repeat the mistakes of the past. Each new calf was a promise and a responsibility. Today, Yellowstone's bison are more than survivors. They are a testament to resilience and to the power of redemption, however incomplete. Across the country, the bison has become a symbol again, not just of wildness, but of the possibility to repair what was broken. For Native communities, their return marks a step toward healing. For America, it is a lesson in humility. Life can endure, but only if we choose to remember and to protect. In the bison's dark eyes, we see both the cost of forgetting and the hope of forgiveness. What remains in the grass? The wind still moves through these grasslands, whispering across the bones of history. The bison have returned, but their shadows linger. A silent reminder of how close we came to losing them forever. Some scars will never fully heal. The prairie remembers, so do the people. The story of the bison is the story of America, a tale of abundance, of loss, of reckoning, and of hope reborn, if we are willing to listen. What have we learned from the price we paid, and what will we choose to remember, as the wild world asks us, again and again, to be worthy of its trust? Out here, in the hush before dark, the ghosts of the prairie are never far away. And as long as the bison endure, their story, and ours, goes on.